Hello everybody and welcome back to Science Live. We're coming to you again from the Creation Education Lab here at the Creation Museum in beautiful, sunny, but frigid Petersburg, Kentucky.
Nice but cold.
I went to the pond at Idlewild Park today to take a sample for the activity we're going to be doing tomorrow, where there will be monsters in the water, so make sure you come back for that tomorrow. And I had to break through a layer of ice to get down into the mud. So,
well, this is April in Kentucky.
We're back in that flux between those systems. And we're, again, bringing you some of these science programs as you guys are dealing with schools being closed. For those of you who have kids in public schools and homeschool families, we hope this is just a way for you to engage and enjoy these programs and learn more about God's creation. So I'm Mr. Roger Patterson, and this is Dr. Georgia Purdom, and we're going to be your hosts today and guide you through this. If you saw the tagline today, the tag was Flaming Foods. Okay, so I like hot, spicy foods.
You do. I don't.
Some good peppers and those things to bring that heat into our food. But that's a different type of flaming that we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be talking more about the energy that's in food and how they fuel our body and those types of things. So you've got your phone out.
So be sure that you are putting your name and your age and your questions. Okay, we love to be able to interact with you. That makes it way more fun for any teacher. So make sure that you are asking some questions based on what you see.
Yeah. I had a mix-up the other day. And when I had Dr. Faulkner on, somebody asked what his favorite plant was. And I ignored the question because it didn't make. And then I realized later, he meant planets. And I missed. So I'll try to be on my toes a little better about that. Okay, so at the end of the program, there is going to be a giant fireball. So there's your tease to hang on till the end. It'll be well worth the wait. All right, today we are going to be talking about the idea of the energy that's in our foods. So different foods that we eat fuel our bodies. But when we think about fuel, we think about a propane tank that lights our grill or the gasoline in our car. Right. That's not exactly what happens inside our bodies.
Thank goodness.
But we talk about it in the same ways because it's a release of energy and there's heat generated and it requires a fuel source and oxygen. So if you think back to our combustion episode a few weeks ago where we shot the potato cannon, there's a fuel source, there's some oxygen, and then there's some type of heat or initiation of the reaction that gets those things started. So the things in our body the foods that we eat fuel our bodies to be able to do all the different things that we need. And the big science word of the day is metabolism. So that idea of how our body uses the energy inside of foods and converts it into sugars that our cells can use, and then storage molecules and things. All of that is called metabolism. So when you hear the word metabolic or metabolism or metabolites, all of those things talk about the way our body uses energy. And the unit that we use over here on the sheet is called a calorie. So you guys have probably heard of calories before. The foods that we eat, they're typically measured in the calories. So a food calorie is actually a kilocalorie when we talk about it in physics terms and science terms, because the food calorie is actually 1,000 calorie units, and 1 calorie or a kilocalorie is the amount of energy it takes to raise 1 kilogram or 1 liter of water by 1 degree Celsius. So here I have a flask that has 1 liter of water in it. Okay? If I took the temperature of this right now, it's probably somewhere around 24 Celsius because it's pretty warm in this room right now. And if I wanted to raise the temperature of this from 24 degrees to 25 degrees, I'd have to add 1 kilocalorie or 1 food calorie of energy to the water to get the temperature to increase. So we measure the energy in foods based on that concept of a calorie or a kilocalorie. So that's the standard that we use to think about that. Okay? So when we think about the foods that we eat, you're probably familiar with food labels and the way that they indicate those things. So we've got a bunch of different foods here representing the way our body uses foods and metabolizes them. So we're going to keep this simple again. Of course, everything we talk about, we could go into lots more detail and lots more explanation. But the basic idea, we're going to talk about 3 classes of metabolism. So we have carbohydrates, sometimes it's just shortened to carbs. Okay? We have proteins, and then we have fats. So those are the 3 basic categories we're going to talk about. Any questions coming in yet from the audience?
Not yet.
Okay.
But one of the things I was going to say is one of the ways that we generate body heat is through metabolism. So metabolism and the breaking down of these things, it's not 100% efficient. And so as a result of some of that energy, it has to go somewhere, right? It can't lose it. It's going to go somewhere, so to speak. And so some of that's converted to heat, and that's actually what helps keep our bodies warm and keep them at the proper temperature.
Yeah, and so your brain has sensors throughout your body that detect that and help regulate that, and they can burn more fuel if we need to increase our body temperature if it's cold outside and those types of things. Okay, so let's think of an example here. I've got a pile of tortilla chips. So this is a bag of tortilla chips. This is my daughter's favorite brand of tortilla chips. And this is the food label that comes with this. So this is 1 serving. I weighed out what it says here on the nutrition guide. It talks about the amount in a serving is 28 grams, or about 7 chips. So if you want to think about a handful of chips, that's probably about 1 serving size. And you can see there it says up at the top, calories 150. And then, if I can hold this steady for the camera here enough, we see that we have a total amount of fat is 8 grams, and there's saturated fat and total fat broken out there. And then we have polyunsaturated fat and monounsaturated fat, so different types of fats. Then we have sodium, cholesterol, then total carbohydrates down here. So that's 17 grams of carbohydrates. And then down here we have protein. So we have fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. All of those things are listed out here on this label. And for any food label, they're going to give us that basic information.
I do have a question.
Okay.
So Gabriel, age 11, wants to know, where do calories come from?
Okay, so the calories come from the chemical bonds that are holding the molecules of food together. So for example, a carbohydrate, something simple, like I've got some table sugar here, that's a pretty simple chemical molecule that your body uses. That's made up of sucrose, so that's 2 glucose molecules hooked together basically. And there are bonds between the carbon atoms in that chain. There are 6 carbons in each glucose, and then 2 of those are stuck together. And your body uses different enzymes and things to break those bonds. And when we break a bond, it releases energy. So the cells in our body use the fuels, the carbohydrates, for example, in your cells to break the bonds and release the energy that's needed there.
Kinley, age 7, would like to know what a gram is.
A gram, okay. A gram is a unit of measurement that we use in science. So if you think about a small paper clip, probably weighs about a gram. So that's the weight of a gram. Probably somewhere around 3 or 4 kernels of popcorn would be about a gram. So that's a unit that we use in science to talk about these things. Okay, so if we had the same amount of potato chips, so I've got the potato chip container here. This is 1 serving. Now both of these contain about 150 calories, but you'll notice the tortilla chips look like they're a little bigger serving than the potato chips. So I would expect that the reason is the potato chips probably have more fat content in them than the tortilla chips. And indeed, if I look at the labels down here, I can see that the tortilla chips have a total fat content of 8 grams, and the potato chips have a total fat content of 9 grams. So fat is more energetic than carbohydrates. It stores more energy than the carbohydrates do. So the higher the fat content of a food, the more calories it's going to have. That's why we tend to want to limit the intake of fats. Now, our body needs fats. To eliminate fats from your diet, you would die. That's not a good plan. Okay? But we need a good balance of carbohydrates and proteins and fats because all of those things are involved in making up our body systems. Okay? All of them are key important ideas. Now, to give you an idea about how much comparatively carbohydrates versus oils, I have here a little container of olive oil, and this is a little more than a tablespoon. And this, okay, if each of these things of chips has 120 or 150 calories, this little tablespoon of oil has 120. So a tablespoon of oil has almost as much calorie count as this handful of potato chips or a handful of tortilla chips. So fats are the most energetic storage molecule that we have. So there's more energy in those bonds in the fats as we break them down per gram.
Sophia, age 9, wants to ask, do we need calories?
Do we need calories? Yes. If you didn't take calories into your body, what would happen to you, Dr. Purdom?
You'll die.
Oh.
I mean, you have to have calories. It's what gives us energy and nutrients.
So there's an idea, bring us back to the idea of metabolism.
Right.
Could you explain maybe the idea of basic metabolic rate and what that looks like for individuals?
Right. So, I mean, basic metabolic rate is going to vary some between individuals. So you might have a friend or something that, or your parents might have a friend that seems like regardless of how much they eat, they're always skinny. They don't put on weight. And that's because they have a faster basic metabolic rate than someone else does. And so it can vary some from person to person, and that has to do with genetics.
Yes.
And your genes and all of those things. But it basically, again, like we were saying, it's important for breaking these things down, giving you the nutrients you need, because you have to build new proteins all the time. You have to build new sugars all the time. You have to build new, you have to build DNA and RNA and all of these things. And so it's important for building, but then it's also important for maintaining body heat and things like that. So.
Yeah, so if we think about the normal individual, whatever that means, we think about 2,000 calories is a starting point for your daily intake. But that's going to change in lots of different ways. Every individual has a different metabolic rate. And one day you may exercise more. You go for a long bike ride. Your body's going to need more calories to keep up with the amount of energy you're burning while you're pumping that bicycle. So balancing the amount of calories that you're taking in with your activity level, with your body type, all of that is part of what we would think of as maintaining a healthy diet and a healthy body weight.
Right. Yeah, and you need this thing. Someone else had asked about are carbs important for a balanced diet? And we were talking about this actually beforehand. Yes, some of these diets today say, oh, don't take in any carbs or don't take in any fat. That is just not a good balanced diet. It has proteins, carbs, and fats, and it has a good amounts of those, because some of the diets today are based on evolutionary assumptions of what our ancestors were like. And that's why they want to cut out carbs and things like that, because they said, oh, they only ate proteins or fats. No, they didn't. Your ancestors ate, which are like starting with Adam and Eve and going up, they ate all these things. So we need to have a balanced diet.
Yep. So let's think about something simple. So we've got some table sugar and some M&Ms here. Again, all of these things are between 120 and 150 calories. So here's a serving of M&Ms. 32 pieces is about 120 to 150 calories. The sugar, there's a serving of sugar that would be about the same. So you can tell relative size. So we often think about eating in a way that satisfies our hunger pains. If you eat a few of these M&Ms and you fill up on sugar and sweets, you're not going to feel full and satisfied, and so you're going to want to eat more, and then you're taking in more calories. And when your calorie intake exceeds what your body's burning, then you start to gain weight. And your body takes these sugars and it stores them as fats in our body. And we know that fats, excessive fats, we need body fat, we can't eliminate that, but excessive body fat can lead to issues like heart disease and clogged arteries and liver disease and lots of other things. So we need to think holistically about these things and try and understand how God has designed our bodies. We can enjoy some M&Ms on occasion.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. But we need to do those things. And the skinny person that you talked about, they could be guilty of gluttony.
Right.
Just eating to satisfy their desires and not eating to fuel their body.
Right.
So we need to think about food is the way that God has given us to fuel our body, but he's also given it to us to enjoy, and there are lots of amazing fun flavors and those types of things. So whether we're talking about something like lima beans, I'm sure that's everybody's favorite. Okay?
My daughter loves those. I do not.
Here we have some carbs and lots of proteins in lima beans and very, very low fat. Okay? If we think about things like pasta, oops, I spilled my oil there. We've got pasta that has lots of carbohydrates in it. But we think of these, we call these complex carbohydrates, and our body breaks them down a little differently than the sugars. We have things like sugar, we've got peanuts that would have lots of both fats and carbohydrates and protein. So this is a very balanced food source. Something like popcorn would be lots of carbohydrates. Marshmallows,
all sugar.
All sugar. This I make fun of things like that. I call them sugar-coated fat sugar. So a Pop-Tart is sugar-coated fat sugar. All of these different things. We've got a little packet of ranch dressing here. All of these are ways that we can bring that fuel to our body, but we've got to do it in a responsible way.
Right. Sophia is asking, how do some things make you feel satisfied while other things like candy don't?
Again, this is the point where different people are going to experience those things in different ways.
Right.
Some people enjoy as a snack, they crave salty foods like chips and oils and carbs. Some people crave just carbs and fats like sweet things like M&Ms and those types of things. Different people's bodies are geared different ways, and we're going to respond to those things in different ways. But generally, we want to think about carbohydrates and fibers and complex foods that are going to fill up our stomach, but give us nutrition and then help us have that satisfied, full feeling that God's given us to know when we've had enough food and eat those things properly. Okay, let's light some stuff on fire.
Oh, yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind slipping on your safety glasses.
Yes, I will. I think I left them back there.
Oh, they slip back there. Okay.
Yep.
We don't expect anything too crazy to happen here. So let's look at olive oil for a second. You may know from the Bible that people used olive oils for their lamps. So oils, this is an oil that comes from a plant, and I've got it soaking in just a piece of rope there, some natural rope fiber. And if I get this lid on fire, it's actually going to, get that.
It's going.
I'm trimming my wick. So if you wonder what trimming your wick means, it means getting your wick into a good position so it can get oxygen to it, but yet the oil is able to transfer up. And you'll notice it's not burning all the way down the rope. It's just burning right there at the surface. So the oil is being drawn up the little fibers in the rope, and it's burning right there at the surface. So this is a demonstration of the calories in the oil being released. And rather than fueling our body, here it's fueling a light source for us. So we can use oils like this to bring us a light source.
Okay, Matt, in answer to your question, yes, we do this program every day at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you happen not to catch it, it's still archived on Ken Ham's Facebook page as well as our Answers in Genesis YouTube channel.
Yes, so there's a dedicated playlist that has all these. They're adding them to it. Okay. Now, what about something like these potato chips? Do they have energy in them? Can we demonstrate the energy inside of this potato chip? Okay, let me get a bigger one so I don't burn my finger.
Bigger chip and bigger fire.
Okay, so now we're doing this all in a very safe, controlled environment. We have flame-proof surfaces all around us. We have a fire extinguisher down on the floor. We've got sprinkler systems up above. So everything that we're doing here is safe and controlled. And I'm a trained expert. I know how to blow things up safely. So if I were to apply some fuel, this initial heat source to this potato chip, I can actually get it to burn. And you'll see the oils starting to come off of there. and I've got a flaming potato chip. And I can count the calories in that in a device called a calorimeter. Okay, go ahead and get that covered up. We're going to capture that smoke so we don't fill up the room with smoke. So I could take this container full of chips and I could burn it, and I could measure the amount of heat that's released from it with a thermometer, and then I could calculate the amount of calories that's in this food. So this is the way that food scientists go about determining the amount of calories in a food source. Okay? Same thing for the tortilla chips. If I were to take one of these tortilla chips, and get it ignited there, that initial source, I've got a fuel source, I've got oxygen in the air, and I can get that tortilla chip to burn, and it's releasing the energy. It's releasing the energy in the form of heat and light, just like if I were to digest it, my body would convert that energy into the cellular component is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate.
There's another big word for the day.
Another big science word. So ATP is we call it the energy currency of the cell. So as those sugar molecules, the glucose molecules are broken apart, that's the form of molecule that the body uses as energy. So we could do that. We could do that with sugar. If any of you have ever made caramels with your parents or your grandparents, basically what you're doing to make caramel is you are taking a little bit of sugar, and we'll mix it with butter and other things to give us different textures and flavors. And we're heating up that sugar until it begins to burn a little bit. And as it burns a little bit, we start to see the browning. And I've just made caramel there on my spoon. You can see the brown color and the bubbles starting to form there, hopefully. So that's how we make caramel. We take advantage of that property of sugar to make things, to give that flavor. So butterscotch and those types of things are made in that caramelization process, where we're partially burning the sugar.
Right.
That's the goal there.
Alex 13 wants to know how you convert energy. So I'm not sure exactly what he means there, but it could be like, so we take these things and eat them, and our body is then metabolizing them and breaking them down, and the energy currency, like he was talking about, that we need is ATP. So it's converting it into those ATP molecules that then we use to do other things with, to build things back up again, so to speak.
And another way we could think about that is the law of conservation of mass and energy that we've talked about before. When we did the marble track with Dr. Faulkner, we talked about the movement of potential energy into kinetic energy. Here we're taking the chemical energy that's stored in the bonds inside the food molecules. We're converting that into another form of chemical energy, which then gets converted into another form, and then through a chain of reactions. And then that chemical energy, for example, in your muscles, that causes your muscles to contract, and that allows my hand to close, and that creates kinetic movement. So we're translating chemical energy into electrical signals in our nerves. We're then doing chemical energy in our muscles. It's a conversion, which causes kinetic energy. So there's lots of different transfers of energy as we think about how our body works and uses all that energy. Amazingly complex.
It is. Whenever we would have to study metabolic pathways or even how we make ATP, it is an amazingly complex process.
But it all just happened by chance, random evolutionary processes, right? No
way.
No way. When we look at the detailed organization of all those things, that was actually one of the things back when I was training as a scientist that made me stop and say, I was an evolutionist at that point, made me stop and say, maybe something did put all this together. And started me down that pathway of thinking about a designer and ultimately trusting Christ as that designer and creator. Okay. Any last questions before we move on to the fun stuff?
Somebody did want to know the difference between monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats.
Okay, so basically when we talk about the saturation of fats, it's we have a string of a lipid molecule and how many hydrogen molecules are attached to it and how it bonds to one another. So if we have unsaturated fats, those are things like olive oil, and they tend to be long chains and they slide past one another easily. That's why oils feel slippery. If we have saturated fats, they tend to be, they form angular pieces and they connect to one another better. So if you think about the white fat that you would find on a beef steak, for example, that's a form of saturated fat. So we get those different forms are based on the way the chemical structure of the fat molecules work. And throughout history, as we've studied these things, sometimes they say unsaturated fats are better for you, sometimes they say saturated fats are better. Again, if we do these things in moderation and keep a good balance, we're going to be fine and treat our bodies well as the temples that God has given us and honor Him. All right, we have a fun activity to close out things, but we're going to kind of wrap up before we do that. So we want to remind you guys that we have our live programs continuing right now every day at noon and 3 and 7 Eastern time, so you can check those out. If you're signed up for notifications on Ken's Facebook page, you'll be getting those notifications. And if you can't watch them live, like we mentioned earlier, they'll be archived on his Facebook page, and then we're also posting those to our YouTube channel as well. So great opportunities for that.
Do we want to?
Yeah.
So we have, if you want to study this in more detail, we have a great book by the late Dr. Tommy Mitchell on the digestive system and metabolism. So this is a upper elementary, junior high book. There's a whole series of these, but this one focuses specifically on digestive system and metabolism. So you can learn more about that.
Okay, so the last activity that we're going to be doing, I'm going to teach you a little principle that people involved in the food industry have to be aware of. For example, if you take grain from the field, we've got these whole kernels of grain, and we want to turn them into flour, you've got to mill them down and grind them up and separate the components, and we get white flour and whole wheat flour and those types of things. But in the process of doing that, you've got to grind things into powder.
Yes, you do.
And that can create a very dangerous situation. And this situation can even arise in your kitchen if you're a messy baker. Okay? So my wife and daughter would claim that title. But they always help clean up, and everything's wonderful. They made me muffins last night, so I can't complain.
Oh, there you go. You
about
can't
their
complain.
baking. But if I take something like this powdered sugar that we've got here, or something like cornstarch, or even this coffee creamer that's in a very fine powdered form, and I spread it out into the air. So for example, if I were grinding these flours in a mill and the powders are dispersing through the air, these things, we know that they can burn. I just demonstrated for you how sugar burns, how the corn grains burn, how the potato grains burn. All of those things are flammable. So if I get these little tiny fine particles and they're surrounded by lots of oxygen, they can become explosive. Now, how many of you have thought of flour as being explosive?
We don't think about that.
We don't think about that. But if we were to leave your mixer running and it's spreading flour dust all over the place, and maybe you had a gas stove that was lit very near there, if the concentration of flour dust in the air got high enough and you're heating up your caramel while you're mixing your flour or grinding it, and that dust gets in the air, it can actually cause an explosion, a very rapid combustion. So an explosion is just really fast combustion. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you today, and Dr. Purdham's going to get out of the way. So what I have over here are some different containers full of, these two have coffee creamer in them, and this one is powdered sugar, and this one is cornstarch. So some very fine powders. I'm going to simulate one of these dangerous flash fires for you with this blowtorch, and I'm going to puff these powders through this tube. So I'm going to use this funnel to get my powders inside of here. So let's do powdered sugar first. Get my powdered sugar down inside there. And you can see the powdered sugar down inside of the tube there. I'm going to blow really hard through this tube, and I'm going to simulate a cloud of powder coming out of here, and this torch is going to be my ignition source. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and turn off the lights. We're going to get the camera in position. Now this is the part where I could lose my eyebrows, but I'm willing to sacrifice my eyebrows for the sake of your enjoyment. And we're going to try and create a little fireball right here in the lab. So I'm going to light my torch. And here we go. Okay. Oh, there's some sugar in my hair. All right, that was our powdered sugar. Hopefully you saw a little fireball puff up there. Let's try this with cornstarch, another very fine powder. So if this were to be inside of the factory where they're making the cornstarch, there's too much powder in the air, and this were to create an aerosol, we'd get this effect. And I can feel the heat coming off of that. All right, why don't we have the camera stand up and back up a little bit, we'll get a little different perspective. Here's coffee creamer. So coffee creamer is primarily a carbohydrate and a little bit of fats in there. See if we can get, oh, I got to take the funnel out. So here's some coffee creamer. We'll do this one twice for you. So we don't usually think of these as flammable substances, but in the right circumstances, they can be dangerous. Okay, we know that that was a little bit light, and hopefully you got to see a little bit of the flame. Maybe you can rewind the video if you get to go back and watch that. We've still got this little bit of fine dust in the air, and I'll probably have to wipe some of that out of my hair. But that's an example of how understanding the environment around us, how chemistry works, can help keep us safe. And I've recorded these on my deck in the dark with a nice fireball in slow-mo, and the link to that will be in the description down in the comments somewhere here on the feed, so you can go watch that. All right, we thank you for joining us again.
And one more thing,
one more question.
Do not try what he just did at home.
Yes.
Okay, I have parents on here, moms on here saying, tell my kids they can't do this. We're telling your kids they cannot do this.
Kids,
okay?
this is a controlled environment, very safe. I've practiced these things. I understand the risks. We've got all the safety things in place, so yeah, be smart. Don't do dumb things. All right, we hope you got to enjoy that and learn a little bit about the way God's created your body to use the foods that we eat, about doing those things wisely. And we hope you get out and enjoy God's creation and learn more about everything He's done for us.